Pickle! Did the error sign. Yes, y'all. Excuse me. From the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Mothership here in beautiful Lewisville, Texas, it's Texas Football Today, a show on the internet. My name's Greg Tepper. I'm the managing editor of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, a magazine, texasfootball.com, a corresponding website. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. Whether you're watching us live, texasfootball.com, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all of the places, or you're listening to us in the podcast, which you can subscribe to on the podcast vendor of your choice. Either way, thank you for doing your part to support your local, mediocre internet show. I'm sitting over there at the helm today, making us sound good. She is the Duchess of the Dorks. She's Ashley Pickle.
Hi, friends. Do you need, water or something?
Okay. I'm good. I got water. Today is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, 240 days until Thanksgiving. Happy birthday to Cy Young, who would be 155 today.
Oh, wow.
Episode 1357. On today's show, friends, we're going to take a look at the most productive Texas high school football receivers in 2022, kind of rounding out our series, taking a look at the most productive returning Texas high school football receivers in 2022. We did passers, we did rushers. Now we'll round it all out with receivers. In the back half of the show yesterday, we had an opportunity to chat with the new head coach at Corpus Christi, Calallen, Coach Steve Campbell, who, of course, is taking over for the all-time winningest coach in Texas high school football history, Phil Danaher. We had a great conversation with him about the job and the unique challenges of taking over for one of the most iconic coaches ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy who's been an assistant for Coach Danaher for 38 years. And so finally getting an opportunity to sit in the big chair that he admits that he is not comfortable in. So we will hear from Coach Steve Campbell of Corpus Christi, Calallen, coming up here at the back half of the program. Do we have first four through the door?
We sure do. It was Nick Morton, Aaron Arbuckle, Coach Terry Crawford, and Rob Hadaway. Welcome in, fellas.
Welcome in, friends. A reminder, texasfootball.com/subscribe. If you want the 2022 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football mailed to you before it hits newsstands, go to texasfootball.com/subscribe. And we will get that out to you. We got a letter from a gentleman today who wanted to subscribe, and we appreciate that. So,
fantastic.
You can
go that guy.
If you want to mail us a check, you can mail us a check. Okay, so I've got a piece going up on Texas football. It's Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday. Thank you. I was really concerned you weren't going to say it,
sorry.
and my heart was starting to hurt.
Sorry. I've got a piece going up on TexasFootball.com today about the top returning receivers in Texas high school football heading into the 2022 season. And it's a weird... Talking about receivers is an odd conversation simply because they are so much at the mercy of who's throwing them the ball.
Right.
And it's one of those classic football chicken and egg situations. And I would say it's even more stark than like you hear this all the time that great running backs are nothing without a great offensive line.
But that's not necessarily true.
I would say that but I don't know. It's a little bit odd that I think there's a different dynamic between running or wide receivers and their quarterbacks. I would use the example of a guy like Braden Locke. Braden Locke was the quarterback for Rockwall from 2019, 2020, and 2021. In 2019, he really broke on the scene, and thanks in large part to
Jackson Smith and
Jigba, right? He threw nearly half of his 4,300 yards to Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, obviously, I don't think it goes without saying that the wide receiver who is at the Ohio State and started in the Rose Bowl made Braden Locke look good.
Yeah.
But also, Braden Locke went on to throw for another 6,800 yards over the next 2 seasons.
And you have to get it there before they can really be counted as receiving yards.
And so it wasn't even it was kind of for that's a perfect example of it's a symbiotic relationship between receivers and quarterbacks. And so you've got to have both. You've got to have both. I think that you can have the number one receiver in the country, but if you don't have a quarterback or you don't have, let's say, the right scheme, then it doesn't matter. You can also have the best quarterback in the state.
Yeah, that would have been like Jackson Smith and Jigba playing for a slot T team.
Exactly
right. What's the purpose there?
But you can also have the best quarterback in the state. But if nobody can catch the ball, then it doesn't necessarily matter. So there's a strange symbiotic relationship, and I found that kind of breaking down the receivers is the toughest one of these three to break down. The other two, I think, are a little bit self-evident and stuff. There's a little bit of more nuance, I think, that goes into talking about the receivers. And so let's talk a little bit about the most decorated receivers coming back, the most productive receivers coming back in 2022. And some of these are going to be, I think, a little bit interesting. We'll start with the gentleman who is the leading receiver in Texas high school football, returning to 2022, in 2022, and that's Lonnie Atkinson. Lonnie Atkinson, the wide receiver at Corpus Christi Miller. He was fantastic in 2020 as a sophomore. He was terrific in 2021, and now he returns as the state's leading returning receiver. And remember, he did that with two different quarterbacks. Yeah. He did with Andrew Body in 2020, and now Jaden Brown in 2021. And by the way,
Jaden Brown was on our quarterback list.
Jaden Brown's coming back. So that's certainly noteworthy that you're going to have one of the top returning quarterbacks throwing to the top returning wide receiver. The second place, maybe you go to somewhere you didn't think about, which is El Paso Eastwood, and their quarterback or their wide receiver Curtis Murillo, who was outstanding as a junior and will come back as a senior there for the Troopers. And they have to replace a quarterback. Andrew Martinez is gone, but they are the style of offense that they run out there is going to be pretty high octane.
And what, they made it to the third round?
I believe that's correct. They made it to the third round. Jordan Tyson. Maybe, we didn't talk a ton about Allen last year. I think just because by Allen standards, it was only an okay year.
Yeah, they lost a district game.
Right.
So that.
But they did have one of the most prolific receivers in the state in Jordan Tyson, who very nearly got to 1,500 yards last year. He's actually the third leading receiver coming back and a guy who will have his quarterback coming back. Then you have 4 and 5. And we group those guys together because, well, they play for the same team. And this is rather remarkable. I can't remember this happening, where you had two guys in Trajan Butler and Darian Gillette who are the number 4 and number 5 returning receivers in the state, both coming back, and also their quarterback's coming back. He was on there. Desmond Woodson was on when we did the top 10 returning passers. We talked about him. He's coming back. And so if you want to buy some stock into a team, Marlin, at least the offensive side, is looking pretty darn good. I would say probably the most underrated guy, and maybe the most underrated guy on this list, comes in at number 6, and David Charo, the wide receiver from Seymour, who led 2A in receptions last year, all of 2A, as a sophomore, and he is now the 6th leading receiver returning. Landon Ransom is kind of in that same way. We talked a little bit about his quarterback, Jacob Wilson, when we talked about the quarterbacks. I believe he was 3rd or 4th as far as leading receivers coming back. And he's going to have his number 1 target back in Landon Ransom, who is a 1,400-yard receiver. Rowan Fluellen helped guide Gilmer to a state championship game. He will be back, although he will have a new quarterback with Brandon Tennyson off to the next level. In the Central Texas area, Little River Academy had Scout Brazil, who was really outstanding for the Bumblebees, and then down in Port Neches Groves, Chance Prosperi, the wide receiver for PNG, really paced the Indians' high-powered attack last year, and will be back for another go-round here at Port Neches Groves down there in the Golden Triangle. What is interesting, there are in total 18 receivers who had at least 1,200 yards receiving last year that are coming back for another season.
Wow.
The ones who didn't make the list, Lewis Williams from Conroe, Devin Matthews from Seguin, Kyle Koch from Dripping Springs, who's going to have Austin Novosad throwing back to him, Jaden Greathouse from Austin Westlake, which is pretty remarkable considering,
I feel like that's a name we've heard for the past 800 years.
Right, well, because he started as a freshman,
right.
For sure.
But he won't have Cade Klubnik.
He won't have Cade Klubnik, but I have no doubt that they'll find a quarterback there at Westlake. Jaden Porter, the sophomore sensation there at Lorena, was a 1,200-yard receiver. Another El Paso kid, El Paso Franklin's Bo Sparks, was a 1,200-yard passer. Amarian Henry from Keller was a 1,200-yard receiver. And then staying in the DFW Metroplex and rounding out the 1,200-yard receivers who are coming back, Walker Mulkey, the wide receiver from Flower Mound, is back. And so there's 18 guys who, if you expand it to 1,000, there's a few other guys who got to the 1,000-yard mark. But I think it's interesting, and I would say at first glance, and I don't have this in front of me, but I would say at first glance, about half of these guys, maybe a little more than half of these guys, have their quarterback coming back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that was kind of the most shocking thing, if as we're going down that list, he's back, and he's back, and he's back.
Yeah, Lonnie Atkinson's got his quarterback back, Jordan Tyson's got his back, Trajan Butler and Darian Gillette have their quarterback back, Landon Ransom for sure have their quarterback back. There may be a couple of others on that top 10 that are going to have guys back. And then, as we mentioned, Austin Novosad, the Baylor commit, is back for Dripping Springs to throw to Kyle Koch. So there's a lot of big-time receiving talent in the state of Texas that is back for another season that's kind of established. And what I think is interesting, this is the only place, by the way, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I believe this is the only category we went through that has that the state's leading receiver is not back after last year. And you take a look at the leading receiver in 2021, 2021 rather. I can look this up really quickly. I believe it was. Oh, this is hard to do on the fly. But there was, I'm sure. Oh, Coy Aiken from Stephenville.
Yes.
Was the state's leading receiver.
Because Ryder Lambert is back, but Coy is not.
Ryder Lambert is back, but Coy Aiken will not be. Coy Aiken was a 2,100-yard receiver last year. So he will not have the, Coy Aiken is gone. He's off to Texas Tech. But we will see, how they replace the weaponry on the outside for Ryder Lambert. But again, it's one of those things where for a receiver to be productive, there's got to be a variety of different things that come through. And so, yeah, that is going to be, it's very interesting. Coy Aiken was, I believe, the 9th guy in UIL Texas high school football 11-man history to top 2,000 yards receiving. So they will have to replace that, but they'll certainly have weaponry out there at Stephenville, and we know they'll have a quarterback. So interesting to take a look at. That's a piece going up on TexasFootball.com, the top returning Texas high school football receivers in 2022. We are Texas Football Today. We're here every weekday at noon on TexasFootball.com, talking football in the Lone Star State. You can follow us on Twitter at TCTF, like us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Dave Campbell's. Follow us on Instagram, Instagram.com/Dave Campbell's, and of course, see us at TexasFootball.com. TexasFootball.com is where you can become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider, TexasFootball.com/subscribe. A lot of good stuff up there right now. Mike Craven has started his Burning Questions series for college football. So he's got, I believe, 3 burning questions for the Texas Longhorns up there on TexasFootball.com. So you can go check that out. And then there's another great article there from Matt Stepp, his most intriguing Texas high school football hires in 2022. So go check that out as the coaching carousel continues to spin. Go to TexasFootball.com to check out all the content we got cooking over there. Yesterday, yesterday afternoon, we had a great opportunity to have Coach Steve Campbell on the phone. Steve Campbell is the longtime defensive coordinator for Corpus Christi Calallen.
Like long time.
38 years. Who now takes over for head coach Phil Danaher. Phil Danaher retired after a remarkable career, the winningest coach in Texas high school football history. And Steve Campbell Steve Campbell was the longtime assistant. I even asked him when we talked, I was like, did you ever have an opportunity to go elsewhere? Did you want to go elsewhere? And he had some really interesting questions. Now he's got the opportunity to lead one of the most decorated programs in Texas high school football and take over for a legend. Really fascinating conversation. Here's our conversation with Corpus Christi Calallen head coach Steve Campbell here on Texas Football Today. Pickle, it's been almost 40 years since we've been able to describe anybody as the new head football coach of the Corpus Christi Calallen Wildcats. But we can do that now. We're joined on the phone line now by the new head coach of Corpus Christi Calallen, Coach Steve Campbell. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are things down there in Corpus Christi?
Well, we've had some cold weather. It's not real good, conducive for baseball and track right now, but we're working hard down here, trying to get ready for another season.
That's actually an interesting place to start. You mentioned track. I know that we'll talk a lot about football here in a minute, but a lot of your time and energy there at Calallen over the past 30-something years has been on the track team, and I believe 16 district championships there with the Wildcats. How important do you feel like you guys' track success has been to what has been obviously success on the football field?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that track does nothing but help you in all sports. If you read even about Tiger Woods, he talks about how he did track, and there's a lot of pro athletes that think track is very conducive to making you a better athlete, and that's not just for men; it's for women as well. But no, I've been a big advocate for track for my 40 years of coaching, and nothing that you could tell me would ever tell me it would change my mind or make me feel any different, because at the end of every year we have a banquet, and I have everybody stand up in that banquet. When I ask them, I said, if y'all have either thrown your implement farther, you've either jumped higher or longer, or run faster at the end of the year, or faster than you've ever run in your life, and 99% of them will stand up. And so it's pretty evident that there's some advantages to running track.
You've you're taking over as the head coach there at Calallen, taking over for the retiring Phil Danaher. No pressure or anything, but this is you've of course been with Coach Danaher for his 38 years there at Calallen, and I'm interested. I know that around there have been kind of some scuttlebutt and some things about you being the next coach there, but when you finally got the hire, when it finally became official, I'm interested in what your feelings were in that moment.
Well, there's been some definite hesitation about the whole thing. I've been coaching for 40 years. I'm 63 years old, and there's always a saying in this business that you never follow a legend. And, you're kind of sticking your neck out when you do something like that. And so, I don't mind telling you, I've been kind of apprehensive and afraid of letting some people down, or there's just a lot of pressure on doing the right thing and keeping this thing going here at Calallen.
Well, it's obviously what Coach Danaher was able to do. They're the winningest coach in Texas high school football history. It's big shoes to fill, but at the same time, you've been a key part of those wins as well. You've been as defensive coordinator for more than 30 years, and I'm interested if you could describe the relationship that you have with Coach Danaher, because you're his longest tenured assistant by a healthy margin, and so I'm interested. Could you describe what your relationship with Coach Danaher is like?
He had about 10 years on me whenever I came over here and interviewed for this job, we were both very passionate about the sport of football. We're very passionate about being around young people and coaching athletics and being a good example. And so we had a lot of things in common in that regard. And we both extremely competitive and never wanted to. Once we started winning, there's even more pressure on you to keep that thing going. But we've always had a good relationship. In fact, it was kind of funny. I was talking to a coach down in Valley, and he said that every time the word Phil Danaher was brought up, the next name out of their mouth was Steve Campbell. Mm-hmm. And the comparison he made, he said, y'all are like peanut butter and jelly. And I thought that was kind of humorous.
Yes, most certainly. We're talking with Steve Campbell, the new head coach at Corpus Christi Calallen here on Texas Football Today. Get involved with the conversation and hashtag TF Today. Coach, one thing I've always been interested in, you've been there and been an extremely successful assistant there at Calallen for a long time. And in this business, in this industry, when you have success, your phone rings. And people call and say, "Hey, are you interested in this job?" I'm sure interested in that job. But you stayed there at Calallen, and I'm interested if there was ever a time where you thought about leaving, or if this was just the place for you.
Yeah, I did apply for a couple of jobs around here, and I, for whatever reason, didn't get them. But Jim Clyburn was a longtime assistant around here also, mm-hmm. and he coached with Coach Danaher for many years. He was our offensive line coach, and he told me a long time ago that a good assistant's job is always a lot better than a bad head coaching job. And so I kind of always kept that in mind. Another thing that always kept me here is that I have a very close family and also an extended family. My mom and dad and my sister and brother-in-law hardly ever miss a game. I mean, they have season tickets, and so it's been a family operation around here for a long time, and always appreciate my family coming to the game, and always tried to make them proud of what I was doing, and wanted them to be proud of me and the community.
Well, the community aspect belies another fact, which is that you're a Corpus guy. You went to Ray. You played high school ball at Ray, and then of course you before you were at Calallen, you were there at Teloso Midway for a couple of years. So for you to get the opportunity to be a head coach and to get that opportunity in Corpus Christi, does that make it particularly special for you?
Yeah, it does. I was extremely flattered after they announced that I was going to get the job, and I had no less than 250 texts and just about as many phone calls from people around the community, and really ex-football players that called me and congratulated me on the job, and I was extremely flattered. And like I said, I've my extended family and friends that's been around here. You know, I was, like you said, I went to Ray High School, graduated in 1977, and there's still some people around here that I don't want to be that person that they read in the newspaper that did something wrong. I want to be that person on TV and the newspaper that did something right. And so I always wanted to, you know, make sure that I made my friends and family proud.
And finally, Coach, you know, we mentioned that it's been a long time since there's been a new head coach there, but and you are as closely tied to Coach Danaher as anybody. But I'm interested in what a Steve Campbell coached Wildcats team is going to look like. You know, every coach, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there are few programs as in good shape as Calallen is. But I'm interested in how you balance keeping, you know, the tradition alive of everything you guys have been doing while still putting your own stamp on the program. Do you have a feel quite yet on how you'll split that difference?
Well, I'm gonna stay on the defensive side of the ball. That's what I know best. I've coached the secondary for every year for 40 straight years of my career, and that's what I played in high school and tried to play in college. But I'm going to stay on that side. So there's not going to be a whole lot of things changing there. In the offensive side, we actually had some offensive meetings, and I've actually said, listen, y'all need, even though I'm not an offensive coach, I'm going to tell you what drives me crazy. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to change a few things here and there, and we're going to try to make the opposing defenses go crazy like I do and put me through all that stress and torture. And we're going to try to do that to our opponents. So there's going to be a few little things that we're going to do and some of it is what we did years ago, and it kind of disappeared for one reason or another, but we're going to kind of get back to some of those things.
He's Steve Campbell. He's the new head coach of the Corpus Christi Calallen Wildcats. Coach, congratulations again on the new job. We can't wait to see what you do with the Wildcats.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
There is Steve Campbell, the new head coach of Corpus Christi Calallen, taking over the big chair there, very big chair. He told us afterwards that he's gotten very confused about going into what he still thinks is Coach Danaher's office, which
every time he talked about it, he called it Coach Danaher's office.
Right. It's a force of habit, and I told him, I was like, Coach, I got bad news. It's probably not going to go away.
He said his new secretary decorated it for him and was like, Coach, that's your office. Yeah, and he's like, no, it's not.
You can go in there. But you know, old habits are hard to break. But excited to see what he does, and interested to see how Calallen is different in under the Steve Campbell regime as opposed to Coach Phil Danaher. Obviously, they worked really closely together for a number of years, so I wouldn't expect them to suddenly go to the air raid and, you know, change into the 10-1 defense. But
yeah.
But I think that there will be, you know, he kind of alluded to it, I think there'll be a few small changes to what they look like.
Mainly offensively, I think, because he said he's pretty set in stone with his defense, which makes sense.
Defense going to stay the same, and he's been coaching secondary forever.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly right. So we appreciate Steve Campbell hopping on with us yesterday. Let's go over to Ashley Pickle for America's second favorite segment. Final thoughts.
Want to remind everyone to hit the red subscribe button on our YouTube page. I know that it's kind of a weird time of year right now, and people are like, oh, sorry, we've been missing the show. If you've been missing the show, it's perfectly fine. If you want to still see the content, we put everything on our YouTube page. So go hit that subscribe button. It'll let you know when it comes out. It's not like a money subscription. It just is a nice little alert system.
Yes, and from the corrections department, we did a segment at the beginning of this about the top 10 leading receivers coming back. Jordan Tyson from Allen did, in fact, graduate. He signed with Colorado. So I have adjusted that. When the story goes up, it will reflect that, but I apologize. That was incorrect. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us. Follow us on Twitter at DCTF. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Dave Campbell's. Follow us on Instagram, instagram.com/Dave Campbell's. And, of course, see us at texasfootball.com. Thanks again to Steve Campbell of Corpus Christi Calallen for being our guest. For Ashley Pickle, I'm Greg Tepper. Vince Young, please give me your Player of the Year trophy. We'll see you tomorrow on Texas Football Today.